Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang. Today we have Frank Cottle, who is the founder of Alliance Virtual Offices. Thank you so much for joining us.
Chris, my pleasure. Happy to be here and happy to share whatever knowledge I can.
Of course. Well, why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about what Alliance Virtual Offices is and what you guys do?
Alliance Virtual Offices really is a culmination of about 45 years for me in the flexible workspace industry. I actually started off as a property company, building buildings that were purpose-built to host and house what were then called executive suites. That's between 1980 and 1990. We were always a technology-driven company, and back in those days, we created the joint venture with AT&T, Bell Labs. We were the first commercial installation of simultaneous voice and data over four-pair twisted cable. We actually were running touch screens on all of our terminals, interconnected with our operating systems back in 1980.
Hmm.
We're using video. We had a full video conferencing system in all of our buildings starting in 1982. So we've always been a tech-forward company. And after building buildings across the southwestern US, a new building every 110 days for 10 years was exhausting. Um, we sold that portfolio and started building what you'd think of as conventional co-working or business centers. And between 1990 and 2000, myself and two partners, we built and took over about 195 centers. We were the largest private operator business centers in the world at that time. And we sold that company in April of 2000. And the reason that we wanted to sell, or that I wanted to sell, is I've decided I wanted to own the customer, but not the facility.
Hmm.
I wanted to be Expedia, not Marriott, if you will. And so I thought there was a better way to service customers on a broad basis. And again, it was technology driven. Today, we service about 200,000 business customers spread across 54 countries, and they are all virtual office clients. So our company, which is a SaaS-based company, provides virtual officing services, meeting room and services, telephony and live reception services across a very broadly based platform. And we do it all using our SaaS system. Um, Fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting space for sure. I think like some of the historical, obviously everybody's kind of now familiar with like co-working spaces. I think with WeWork and the rise and fall of that situation. But I think before that, you still had virtual offices like through Regis or things like that, where people probably are maybe familiar with those types of names too. Um, I'm curious though, you've had several decades in this space, probably seen different cycles. Can you walk us through the various types of business models first?
Well, the using the flexible workspace
Yep.
industry at large, let's use that at large. It's really pretty simple. The flexible workspace industry combines people, place, and technology, bundles them together into a single product, and delivers that product with a highly flexible service agreement. So it's very simple. It's kind of like bread, salt, water, flour, and you got bread. It's very simple.
Mhm.
People, place, and technology. The differentiation comes in brand differentiation of the models, however. You have the classic business center, let's say Regis. A lot of people are familiar with that company, great company. Good friend of mine founded it. And they take their people, place, and technology, and they add professional services and image to it. And so they're a classic business center. And you want to do a same mix, a co-working center. They take people, place, and technology, and they add business growth through a collaborative community. So their bread is a little different than Regis's bread, but it's still bread. Okay, and then you might take an incubator, either one of those guys, but with mentoring. You want an accelerator. Well, that's an incubator with access to capital.
Mm-hmm.
These models take that same people, place, and technology, bundled product, highly flexible service agreement. You've got culinary centers, which are shared
Yep.
kitchens. You've got media centers, and all variety of this, catering now to different industry segments.
Yeah.
So that's the core. And then the customer base for that breaks down into five major categories. First category is government. People don't think of government as needing flexible workspace, but one thing that almost every government in the world has in common is a budget, and budgets are annual. So government doesn't like to make 10-year agreements. They like to make 1-year rolling agreements if they can. So the government has now become attracted to the flexible workspace industry. The large corporates, we can talk about them separately, but we all know the flexibility needs that they have these days. And then you've got another sector, which are the professions, legal, accounting, financial services. That's the core of the industry going back to its beginnings. Branch offices need a flexible workspace. And primarily, we see media and technology companies, distribution companies in that regard, and then startups. Startups are obviously need the most flexibility of all. Let's take yourself as an example. If you and I were each going to be start a new technology company, and we each needed $1 million and went to a VC, and we went in and we each made a pitch, and you know what the pitch is going to be. We're each going to make a pitch, and the first question that VC is going to ask is, "What are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do with the money?" So I say, I make my pitch and I say, well, let's see, I'm gonna get an office and hire a receptionist and get some furniture, buy some computers, some imaging equipment. Then I'm gonna hire some engineers and build my software. And then you walk in and he says the same thing, that VC. And you say, oh, I'm gonna move into, I think I'll get a virtual office and hire some engineers. Who's gonna get the money?
Yeah. Of
Who's going
course.
to spend the money most wisely?
Mhm.
Who's going to have the greatest probability of success? You are. So everything to do with flexibility today, it used to be companies needed two primary ingredients to be successful. They needed a product that had customer demand, and they needed access to capital so they could scale. Today, you have to add flexibility.
Yeah.
You've seen so many companies today outgrow their capacity to flex, and then they get trapped. And that just won't work anymore. That just
Mhm.
won't work anymore. So add flexibility to the componentry necessary for success, and you have the future of work.
Got it. A couple of questions as you're speaking there. One is the idea of, you use the bread analogy, and I think about, okay, so you can go completely vertical also, like some of these companies, and then manufacture the flour, right? Or like in this example, like buy up the properties like WeWork did, right? And um what are the advantages or disadvantages of creating the flexibility layer of like providing the bread, but then going vertical and then completely like owning the manufacturing part of it, or owning the properties in this case?
So that's where we started as a property
Yep.
company.
Yep.
We didn't just own the centers, we owned the dirt and the building and
Yep.
all the technology included. So we started there, but it was very, very capital intensive,
Yep.
very slow to grow. And we thought that there was a faster, better way to move. So we went to operate. We used before WeWork and even before Regis, we used the classic business center model. Lease a floor, two or three floors in a building, fixturize it, fill it full of tenants, etc. And then what are you exposed to? You're exposed to the cyclicality of the market. You have a ever escalating fixed cost, your underlying lease, against a highly variable income overall. At one point in time, at one moment in time, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
You're going to get in trouble. So this is really the other thing is, and this has been displayed. I think it's evident more with IWG, who owns Regis, than WeWork, because WeWork was so many different valuations. They teased the market. I won't say tricked the market. I'll say they teased the market into thinking they were a technology company somehow. I I don't know how they could do that, but they did it. But using IWG as an example, or anybody in that model today, we work now too. They have a fixed liability, the monthly payments to the landlords. Okay. And if they have a 10-year lease, well, 9 of those 10 years end up as debt. A lease is a debt instrument, end up as debt on their balance sheet. So they have 1 year's worth of income versus 9 years worth of debt. The balance sheet as you start to scale begins to look extremely ugly, and it suppresses the overall value of the company. So your shareholder value is diminished as a result of that model overall, in my opinion. That's why I sold out in 2000 and created a technology model where I own the customer, but I don't own any centers, but I own a couple 100,000 customers. And that's a much nicer model for me. I'd much rather have a tech valuation, internet enabled, technology enabled, software as a service. Look at the multiple of revenues on those types of companies versus the multiple of revenues on a company like IWG, which is 0.8 right now.
Hmm.
Not one, but 0.8. Okay. So it's the model is different, and the scalability of the model is different. If WeWork wants to go out and get 500 new customers, they have to have a real estate department that finds a location, negotiates with a landlord, finances or gets the landlord to finance, which they do through the lease, all of the tenant improvements. They have to put up the cash for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. They have to take a year or two to fill it up, during which time they have negative cash flows, operating losses. And then after 2 years, they have 8 years left on a 10-year lease to make their profit. Otherwise, they have to renegotiate that lease at the end of 10 years to new market rates. Okay. If I want to get 500 new customers, I have to pay, I'll say Google, $285 a piece to get them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
and it's just totally different model, totally different.
yeah, I mean, totally different models, and I get it. I mean, it's it's a SaaS play, it's a marketplace, connecting offices with customers. It's more scalable, you can upsell your customers into different, services and things of that nature
Well,
from.
that's the key. That is the key. Someone may take a virtual office, but you also want to begin selling them conference room time, additional services, management services, things of that nature to help them grow. You want to sell them telephony, live reception services, etc. And you want to sell them everything that a company needs in order to operate. The bare minimums, but if you can do that, there's about 7 or 8 things that you have an option of selling them. And you want to be involved with them, the startups, from the moment they begin business life. You don't want to call them 6 months after they're a startup. You want to be with them on day one.
Yep,
Uh, and that's an important element of it as well.
absolutely. Um, Again, I want to take advantage of the fact that you've been in this space for a long time now. Um, at some point in history, the antiquated model of owning the property like that you were in, of owning the physical location, the dirt. And then I don't know in your opinion if it was like layering on some technology and then calling yourself, a virtual office first, or was it a property company first? And
We're
the way that you marketed the space was like a virtual office, or
when we, there's two layers to that, I think, Chris. First layer is who did you call yourself when you tried to raise capital?
Mm,
What did you say? What was your business model? In that regard, we were a property company that had enhanced returns over a conventional commercial office company. We were generating approximately 3.5 times the revenue per square foot that a normal commercial office building would of the nature that we had in the locations we had. Now, we also had higher operating overhead. We had the technology and the personnel, et cetera. But we were still generating about a 50% to 100% increase over conventional space revenues. Um, so that's one, what you're calling yourself. What you call yourself after that, we never called ourselves a virtual office so much as we referred to ourselves originally as a business center.
mm,
There a term before that was executive suite. That got confusing though, because you have executive suites in hotels, executive suites in stadiums. And so we went away from that in the early 80s. And we called ourselves a business center operating company or a serviced office company until 2000. And that's when we made our shift to a virtual office company. But the Regis today would still be considered very effectively so a serviced office company and a good one. They're a very good company. And Then others call themselves co-working companies. That's that brand differentiation. Just like the automotive industry, you've got sports cars and station wagons and SUVs. Well, it's the same in our industry.
yep,
Uh, Little brand differences.
yeah, they still get you from point A to point B in the same way.
Yeah, you're still you have that people, place, and technology mix.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess, where in that shift from, like, you mentioned 2020 and then changing it to virtual office, but then the way that you kind of explained the model now in terms of owning the customer seems to be much more attractive. Is that more attractive from a personal stamp? I think you mentioned it a little bit in the very beginning, in terms of just how much work it requires to own the properties, but I guess, um,
Well, they're just different models, and a
yeah,
property company makes a yield or return on its rents, assuming it's full, and that's cyclical. And then an increase in its appreciation value through time, you hope.
yeah,
But look at what's happening in New York right now.
yeah,
Major buildings worth 100, 200, $300 million being sold for 70, 80, 90% devaluations. Okay, we can talk about the ripple effect of all that through industry at large,
yeah,
but just because you own a building and some dirt doesn't mean you're necessarily going to do okay.
yeah,
The old location, location, location. Hey, New York's a great location. So it's really not location, location, location. It's really timing, timing, timing.
mm,
All buildings are good at a particular moment in time, and all buildings are bad at a particular moment in time,
mhm,
regardless of the location.
yeah,
Uh, so if you think of that, so our process was quite simple. We said, well, let's just escape the damn building to begin with. Let's remove ourselves from all of that and work on a pure technology model. And I don't know that there's a difference. You could say, what's the difference between Netflix and what were those guys in the blue stores? Yeah, one of those guys. Well, one streaming and one had a hard inventory with hard fixed locations and people managing those locations and blah blah blah. It's all video, baby. It's all entertainment, but somebody changed the model and came up with something that was more efficient.
yeah,
You could look at Microsoft and say, I remember when I used to buy shrink wrapped software upgrades for Microsoft. Now I don't do any of that. Microsoft has me in a streaming software model, and I don't have any choice. I'm gonna renew it, and that's that.
Yeah.
And they don't have to worry about inventory. They don't have to worry about distribution systems, stores, bad packaging, theft, none of that. So
Yeah.
every industry is making advances in that regard. And I think property industries are as well right now.
Yeah, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this too. It's like, yeah, I know we're seeing the decline of commercial office buildings, because of seemingly the pandemic, and despite, I think, some of these like larger institutions to demand people come back into offices, it's not working as well as they expected in terms of outcomes. And my curiosity is, with the overall de decline of available space, do you feel like you will still be facilitating commercial space, or the idea of space in general starts being redefined as to where you can work? And I bring this up for one point because there's a company that is in Portland that I had met with, that uh is one of their investors is Airbnb, but they are taking residential space
Sure.
and then redistributing that as like shared office
Uh-huh.
space,
Uh-huh.
essentially.
They're
So
doing that primarily for meeting and workspace. Yes.
yeah,
I forget the lady's name that runs it. Really nice lady,
yeah.
that runs that company. Great person.
Amina,
Yes, yes.
Amina. Yeah, yeah.
Really good model. I think that certain people that's going to work for, and
Yep.
just like certain people it works to work out of their home versus work out of a commercial office space. But ultimately, we all need a place to gather together, to meet. And there are certain functions that require that people do work together, at least part-time. I think what we'll see is a migration away from everybody in the office. That's obviously happened. Also away from remote working in the home office on a permanent basis. That was a pandemic snapshot, to a hybrid work model where people use a variety of facilities. And I'll use myself as a good example, or I'll use let's use something else. Digital nomads. Okay, a digital nomad. Your image of a digital nomad might be a younger me with a guitar and a laptop going to Bali with my surfboard and doing gig work while I survived in a hostel. Okay. That's not a digital nomad anymore. Now what you have are what are called digital slow mads. A slow mad is someone like you or I that might have a permanent job, but we decide to work in France for a year or 6 months,
Hmm.
or we decide to work in somewhere for a while, but we are dedicated to our job. We've got a career, etc. And then you have what's called a digital nomad, a local nomad. And that's myself is a perfect example. I'm at my home office today. Yesterday, or not yesterday, but at the end of last week, I was at an office that I keep downtown for some meetings, and I might easily be at another office. One of my colleagues is at an office of ours in New York today. I might be in 4 or 5 offices. It doesn't matter which one, so long as I have my connectivity and the people that I need to meet with. So I'm a local nomad. I'm a lomad
Yep.
overall. And I would suspect that you are too.
Yep.
Did you ever meet anybody at a coffee shop for business?
Yep.
Have you ever been in a co-working or a business center to meet somebody in a conference room? You ever work out of your home? Do you work out of a regular office from time to time? All of the above. And
Yep.
that's what we're going to. And it's a comfort level. And a perfect example of that is the first video conferencing system that we had was in 1980, 81, 82, about when we started using it effectively. It
Mhm.
was expensive. It would cost us $150, $250 an hour to fire that thing up, and we had to have somebody connect two systems together, and you had a codecs and all this stuff going on just to talk to somebody on a screen. And it was mostly used by engineers doing document sharing and stuff. But we were doing that then. Progressively, we've gotten to the point where I don't care where you, I don't even know where you are. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You're totally comfortable creating a relationship, being you. You don't have to be on camera and put a suit on. You're just being you. And we've gotten totally comfortable with that. And so that is going to change a lot of things too. That allows us to be lomads or nomads. It allows us to have more freedom, and it allows us to get more work done. You
Mhm.
can't imagine how many, well, just on American Airlines, I have over 3 million flight miles.
Hmm.
Okay, that's setting up a global network of offices and everything. How much time did I spend in an airport, in customs, in different places, and how productive was that? It was awful,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
have to do it. Today, you don't do any of that stuff, or you don't need to, maybe a tenth of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about themes in cyclical trends, right? I think about I wonder, right? I think like I wonder if it will ever be important to be back in the same space pre-pandemic, like how we were pre-pandemic, of like being able to be in that. Because I do think that for those of us that have gone through that as the majority of our careers, being in a office space with other employees, like there's definitely a benefit to that.
Absolutely.
There's a
No,
loss in,
absolutely.
you know,
You can't dispel the benefits of either one of them.
yeah, exactly, right.
Okay. That therefore hybrid.
Yeah,
Little of this, a little of that,
yeah,
makes a better relationship overall. If I have to sit in the same office with the same people every day, it's going to look like that TV show, The Office.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
it's going to get pretty silly.
yeah,
If I never see anybody, never meet anybody, never get together with my team, it's going to be pretty hollow.
yeah,
All I do is work.
yeah.
And that's not good either. You do need both. And each individual company and the culture of that company, the product itself, is going to dictate that.
Mhm.
We're talking right now about primarily white collar workers, knowledge workers,
Yeah,
this context. Guys on the factory floor, gals on the factory floor, they go to the factory every day. They didn't have this luxury, but you know what? The robotics coming as it is. I saw an ad the other day for a machinist. It was for a machinist, and the job was to remotely manage a series of robotically enabled machining tools.
yeah,
This person could be anywhere in the world managing these tools. Okay. And we're going to start seeing factory floors change in that regard. We know that the restaurant industry, particularly the fast food industry, there's not going to be somebody doing the fries anymore at McDonald's. Okay. All these changes are going about. And my hope is that it gives all of us an opportunity to do something more interesting than we otherwise would have done, contribute more value than we otherwise could have done so, spending 2 hours a day commuting and an hour a day trying to get up and down in elevators and in and out of securities in large buildings, et cetera. I'm hoping we can do things that are more productive, create more value for not just who we work for, but for our families, for everybody around us.
yeah. I mean, I would say it's definitely an interesting time. And I think that there's a lot of changes that are happening, some that the general population is keenly aware of, and some not so much. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, you're right. Like, you imagine a world where, a McDonald's doesn't even have to be a McDonald's anymore. It doesn't have to be this huge physical location for it to operate. You could still have its drive-through, but then a lot of it could be delivered, and it's delivered through autonomous vehicles by Uber from,
Sure.
a location to then your door. And
Well, there's already in the fast food industry, there's already I'll call it a movement on, a real estate movement on.
mm,
Want to reduce the requirements by the cities for the number of parking spaces that are required by the cities because so much of their food product is picked up and delivered now.
yeah, that's interesting.
So when you think about it, well, do they need 100 parking places for a McDonald's or 50 or however many they have? Whatever the city requirement is X per square foot, per this, per that, per a fast food restaurant. Yeah, they could probably do it 20% less now.
Interesting. I don't think I wasn't aware of that. I don't think most people are aware of
So, well,
that.
these
That
are
makes
all
sense.
ripple effect issues for the
Yeah.
changes in the economy, which is based in great part upon shared service technologies. You mentioned Uber is a good example of that, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Big difference. I don't drive to the airport anymore. I
Yeah.
won't drive to the airport anymore with my own car. I won't park there anymore because I don't have to.
Yeah.
And I think an awful lot of people, where before a private car to go to the airport was a luxury,
Yeah.
now it's more
More
commonplace
cost effective.
than not. So now
Yeah.
airports don't need as much land for parking.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of things that we can manage better now, and it's quite exciting. And you don't need corporate headquarters doesn't need a desk for every person. They were only 42% utilized anyway, even when everybody was working in the office. The average desk use was 42%.
Yeah.
So now if we take and just add 1 day a week of hybrid work away from the office, that's another 20% less use.
Yeah.
2 days a week or three, which is most common, every real estate company in the world, every brokerage company is saying, well, the large companies are coming back, they're renewing their leases, but they're taking 15%, 20%, 50% less space. They're renewing them, they're keeping space. They're just taking less of it because they just don't need it.
Yeah.
The good news is that that space will be able to be repurposed, hopefully in high density markets, into residential units, lower the cost of living in major cities like Manhattan, and allow the cities to be 24-hour cities instead of 12-hour cities. And that will boost the economies and the tax mode and everything in those cities and make them much nicer places to live and better for everybody. There'll be a gestation period, 5, 10, 15 years before that comes to total fruition, but hopefully it will, and that's a beneficial outcome of this change.
Yeah. That you read my mind at that part, which is what are you going to do with all the unused space and the reduction of space? And I think about, just being in Los Angeles, like Los Angeles is like notorious. If you're in the city, certain parts of the city, it's notoriously expensive to buy homes now, and it's not
Oh yeah.
practical for the average,
Well, I'm originally from Newport Beach. I just moved
there
to
you go.
Texas 2 years ago. So trust me, I understand housing values. I lived on an island. I know that.
Yeah, there you go. On that note, I want to say we're up on time, so thank you so much for uh, making the time for us and sharing your expertise. Very interesting conversation. Never know kind of what you're going to get into, but that was a lot for us to think about.
Well, if I can help in any way, just reach out and be happy to do so.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Take care.